Hey, my name is Salty, and today I'm going to teach you how I play Brand. Brand is your typical mage. He has a lot of ability power, a moderate amount of health, and not a whole lot of defense. Seer is a standard skill shot. It travels in a straight line and hits the first target it comes in contact with. Pillar of Flame is a small AoE blast with a very large range. Conflag is pretty straightforward. It's just a short-range spell that does instant damage. Pyroclasm is your ultimate. You can think of it like a pinball. It's going to bounce around and hit up to 5 enemies total. It's not that great on a one-on-one, but in team fights it does a massive amount of damage. If Brand hits an enemy with one of his spells, it will activate his passive, dealing damage over a period of 4 seconds. While your opponent is afflicted with one of these dots, your abilities will have additional bonus effects. Seer will stun an enemy, Pillar of Flame will do significant bonus damage, and Conflagrate will hit all other enemies nearby. So let's take a look at the early game. Most people start off with Conflag or Seer. I don't recommend this. I always use Pillar of Flame. It's going to allow you to harass enemy champions from behind their minions. It's got a further range than Conflag or Seer. You can hit bushes without being in them, and it's going to allow you to farm enemies' minions very easily with that high AoE damage and dotting a lot of minions very quickly. Next, I'm going to pick up Seer, mostly as a defensive ability. If someone's hit by my Pillar of Flame, I can use Seer to quickly stun them and back off. After level 2, I max out Conflag and then Pillar of Flame. Conflagration is going to give you the most damage on enemies during a fight, and Pillar of Flame, when someone is ignited, does a massive amount of damage. Seer, on the other hand, not a lot of damage, and all you need is that 1 point to get you a stun. The trick to playing Brand effectively is knowing when to use your spells and in which order. For farming minions, there are 2 different effective rotations that I use. You start with Seer to get that initial ignite off, Conflag that same minion will spread ignite to all the other nearby targets, and then Pillar of Flame will do a huge amount of damage to anything that's ignited in that AoE area. The other farming method is useful if you have a low amount of mana. Start with Pillar of Flame. It's going to ignite a lot of enemies in a small area. After that, right before your dot wears off, you use Conflagrate to do damage to all those enemies again, and then it also refreshes that dot on top of it. It doesn't do quite as much damage as the other rotation, but it's still enough to get by and save you a lot of mana. Fighting champions gets a little bit more tricky. You start with Conflag to get the initial dot on, then you can use Seer and Pillar of Flame. Seer is going to stun the target, and Pillar of Flame does a huge amount of damage. It doesn't matter which order you use those last 2, as long as you get Conflag off first. Pyroclasm, on the other hand, is actually something that you want to use at the very beginning of a team fight. It'll put ignite on all of your enemies, and it'll let you do Pillar of Flame next. So it'll go Pyroclasm, you'll get dots on all your enemies, Pillar of Flame will do its bonus damage, and then you have Seer left over still as a defensive stun, and after all of that, you'll still have Conflag to reignite any enemy nearby, and then by the time all that is done, usually you're going to have enough time to get even another Pillar of Flame off after that. So in a team fight, Pyroclasm, Pillar of Flame, and then use whatever else comes off cooldown after that. Retreating as Brand takes a lot of patience and training. You have to keep Seer and one other ability off cooldown. You can't just blindly throw spells. You need to ignite them first and then use Seer to stun them. If you're fighting in a tower, typically you want to harass with Pillar of Flame and Seer. They both have a long range, so you're going to be able to hit them even when they're standing behind the turret. Now, if you're lucky, you'll get off a stun from your Seer. In that case, I'll run in, hit them with Conflag and Pyroclasm. That pinball is going to do a lot of damage, and it's going to allow you to hit the target even while you're walking out of range of that turret. Now remember, Pyroclasm will also bounce off minions, so not only is it a great farming tool, but you can actually destroy an enemy champion that isn't paying attention and use Pyroclasm when they're standing near minions. It's going to bounce, hit the champion, and just go back and forth between the minions and the champion and do a lot of unsuspecting damage. If you're playing defensively as Brand and being careful, it's extremely hard to get killed. The only times I die as Brand is if I'm being stupid and overextend, or if all 5 are there and focus me in a team fight. Brand has a lot of offensive power, and the closer an enemy gets to you, the easier it is to hit them with your stuns and your abilities. If you're chasing an enemy down, you start with Pillar of Flame. It's got a huge range. Just make sure you aim ahead of the target so that the closest corner to you is barely on them. So that way they'll walk right into the middle of the Pillar of Flame. After that, you follow it up with a Seer for the stun, and watch your allies do the rest. There's a lot of information here, but the most important thing is QEW for minions and EQW for champions. If you can learn those two rotations of abilities, the rest of Brand is just rolling your face over the Q, W, E, R buttons and watching people die before you. For Brand's items, I start with a Sapphire Crystal for the obvious mana and potions. Later I'm going to want to build that Sapphire Crystal into a Catalyst and pick up my Boots of Speed. On my third trip back, it's really best to get your Sorcerer's Shoes, and if you can pick up a Blasting Wand, great. We're going to build the Catalyst and a Blasting Wand into a Rod of Ages as quickly as possible. Once you have the first two items done, your Boots and your Rod of Ages, you want to try and get a Crystal Scepter for even more health on top of your Rod, and then you'll also have that slow proc to really help with chasing down enemies. After you have those three items done, you do a Force of Nature, which is going to increase your health regen and really negate any need for health pots after that. And it's also going to give you magic resist and a little bit of added movement speed to keep your survivability up. Also, Will of the Ancients will give you Spell Vamp, which, of course, on top of your health regen, is going to help you keep health topped off very easily. If you actually get to late game, and you need that 6th item to fill a slot, Rabadon's Death Cap gives you a ton of added ability power. You can never go wrong with more AP. For masteries, I go 9, 0, 21. This is enough to get the Magic Pen ability power and cooldown reduction out of offense. Then, in utility, it's going to give you 3 movement speed for your Force of Nature, as well as added health regen. It's going to increase your blue buff, it's going to decrease your cooldowns even further, and of course, increase things like experience gain, your clarity effectiveness, and ability power. Summoner spells are pretty straightforward. You have Clarity to increase the amount of time that you can spend in a lane without running out of mana, and then Ignite to finish off your enemies or to really punish someone who's trying to harass you head on. To prove the effectiveness of my playstyle of build as Brand, here are the last 14 games that I have played. I have 1 defeat and 13 victories, and on every single game, including the defeat, I have a positive kill-death ratio. That's all for my build right now on Brand, the Burning Vengeance. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them below, and I'll answer them as best I can for you. Thanks for watching.
Victory! Is that fire?